If I start telling people about hell, I might just scare them off. Where are you going to scare them off to? Hell number 2? Or are you just going to sit there and let them burn?
Yes, this is Chris from Don't Let Them Burn. Welcome back to the program, everybody. This is Paranormal Shift, episode 12, the paranormal theory of everything. And today I have a special guest, Ken Ammi. That's how you pronounce your last name, right?
Yeah, sure. Ammi. It's fine.
Ammi. Okay, all right. Welcome to the program. How you doing?
Great, and thanks for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Yes, sir. And tonight we're going to get into some weird stuff that maybe some people have heard, maybe they haven't, but I think it'll be enlightening for everybody. You take your notes, you do your own research, you double check the facts. You don't let Facebook fact check you. You do your own fact checking, okay? So here we go. Where'd you like to start?
Well, I figured we'd go down a trail from, let's say, discussing angels to cherubim, seraphim, demons, Nephilim, giants, the usual.
Yeah, sure thing. I know there's two different types of, what is it, 13 different tribes or something like that in the Bible? Plus, there's a difference between Nephilim and Raphaim.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Let's work our way there, and if you don't mind, instead of starting there.
Sure thing.
Especially because if you get me talking about that, forget about it. We won't touch on anything else.
I hear you. No problem. Anywhere you want to take us, man.
Yeah, well, I hope to start just by beginning. Start by beginning. Yes, I would like to start by beginning. That's absolutely sure. Yeah, definitely. I'll have just to note that, William Ramsey, our common buddy, put us in contact with each other. And
yeah.
It was like instant rapport, when we started talking, it was as if we had known each other for years. We were just on point. So then we decided to do a show together to kind of discuss certain topics. And I figured, well, why not start with these issues?
Yeah.
Since they are, I find, very misunderstood.
Yeah.
A lot of it is based on common knowledge, which I came to figure out means that everybody knows, even though nobody knows how anyone knows. So we believe a lot of this stuff based on common knowledge and just basically based on vague generalizations. So there's things that are easy to believe and remember and agree on, but when you dig deep, they're always a little bit different.
Yeah.
So for instance, biblical angels is one of those. And, I've written quite a number of books on the issues that we're covering tonight. So I'm going to kind of speak in generalities, because if this turns into a bunch of quotations and citations, it won't make for a good show, right?
Oh.
So anything that you feel I'm asserting, just believe me, I got a whole book on it, on angels, demons, Satan, Nephilim, you name it. I even put one together called The Paranormal in Early Jewish and Christian Commentaries. And that book was great because it's like 500 pages, and all I wrote was like a half a page intro. The rest of it is just quotations and citations. So it's subtitled Over a Millennia's Worth of Comments on Angels, Cherubim, Seraphim, Satan, the Devil, Demons, Serpent, and the Dragon. So in other words, I've looked at this material biblically, extra biblically, and from what scholars have to say and what the pop research have to say, as I call them, and everything in between.
Yeah.
So just starting with angels, there's certain basic things, like I said, common knowledge that everyone knows about angels, such as that they're spirits, they take on human bodies to interact with us, they have wings, except none of that is biblical.
Okay.
None of it. So the first misconception is that they're spirits. Okay, now we have to be careful to distinguish between spirit and spiritual, right?
Yeah.
So like we humans can be spiritual, but we are actually another category, I would say. We are body, soul, and spirit, but we're spirit that inhabits a body, right? So we're not without flesh and bone, as Jesus said, a spirit has not flesh and bone.
Mhm.
But we do, because we inhabit a body. So the issue is, every single time the Bible describes an angel, they are described as looking exactly like human males, right? No wings, no halo, just exactly like a human male, which is part of why they're often thought to be or confused as human males, right? Like Paul says, you might entertain angel unaware. Why?
Mhm.
Because they look exactly like us, right?
Yeah.
There's times where they appear a little more like glorified, as we would call it. They're just in more their natural state. They're just something eye-catching about them, like their pores are so clean.
Yeah.
But but otherwise, the issue is the claim that they are spirits and therefore not physical or embodied comes really from one single verse. It's stated in three, really, but they all collapse into one, and this is why. In Psalm 104, it makes a statement about angels. Then that psalm is quoted in Hebrews 1, and then it's commented upon in Hebrews 1. That's why I'm saying the three of those really collapse back into the psalm.
Okay.
And so in the psalm, it talks about he makes his messengers, or he makes his angels, right? Because that's all angel means, is messenger. He makes them, let's say something right now, just a blank. He makes his angels something, his ministers a flame of fire, right?
Yeah.
And so some versions have he makes his angels spirits, his ministers a flame of fire. So therefore, people will read that one verse and build this entire doctrine upon it, which is that angels are spirit.
Mm.
But the issue is a twofold at least. One is that there's a Hebrew word, which is ruach, that refers to either spirit or wind. Okay. And now it just so happens that there's a Greek word pneuma, which also either means spirit or wind. And so the question of how to translate it is always determined by the context.
Yeah.
So the context of the psalm is extremely clear because things are being likened to natural phenomena, such as it's talking about God covering himself with light, as with a garment, stretching out the heavens like a tent. He lays beams on his chambers of the waters. He makes cloud his chariot. He rides on the winds of the wind. He makes his messengers. So then when you ask yourself how you translate it, you obviously have to go with wind because it matches the context of the natural phenomena.
Yeah.
It's that simple. So then when you get to Hebrews 1 and it's quoting this verse, then you also have to go with winds. And when it's commenting upon that verse, it also has to be winds. That's the context, okay? And that's why there are many versions, many English versions who do have winged in that psalm, and then Hebrews 1. So that's really important because we have so many descriptions of angels looking just like human males, but one referring to them as spirits. And people just say, well, let's take the one and negate all of the other ones where it should be reversed.
Yeah.
Logically and theologically, it should be, let's take the preponderance of the evidence. And then when you get to this one single verse, don't overturn all the others, especially when it's clear that you have translational options and the context is telling you how to translate it. So there you have it.
Yeah.
So, but what does it mean that angels are physical? Well, it seems to me, I always liken them to the way that Jesus is physical post-resurrection, in that he's physical enough to touch, he can eat, he's walking around, right? But he can be visible or invisible, right? He can do things that we can't in our fallen state. So that's a good way, I think, to think about angels, is that they inhabit glorified or uncorrupted bodies. And so that's why they're different. Like Paul talks about that there's different kinds of flesh. So they are physical, but they have a different sort of flesh so that they have access to other, whatever we may term them, dimensions, realms, what have you.
Yeah.
And then also another psalm tells us that we were made a little lower than the angels, right? So that's a very important thing to know off the bat is angels have their own physicality because there's also no statement in the whole entire Bible about them shape shifting or morphing or taking on human bodies or physicality. Nothing. It's just nothing like that.
Yeah.
So this is just a very basic biblical understanding of who and what they are.
Mhm.
And again, angel meaning messenger means that it's also their job description. That's their primary function,
Mhm.
is they deliver messages. So that'll become important when we move to the next category, which is cherubim. Okay, because the issue is you often hear, well, angels, seraphim, cherubim, they're all different kinds of angels.
Mhm.
But categorically, that's not the case because we'll end up finding out they have different titles, different job functions, and they all look different from one another. So, how could they all be kinds of angels when, for example, cherubim and seraphim do not deliver messages? And again, they're different categories of being. And that's so it's important for us to categorize these things and systematize them. So now when we talk about cherubim, we are talking about beings with wings. But just to give you an idea of the common knowledge that we have, if I point out that cherubim have wings, right? What does somebody naturally envision instantly? I would imagine they're thinking about birds' wings, right, with feathers.
Right. Yeah.
But why? Why
Because
not?
the
Yeah,
imagery passed down through the Catholic Church and statues and whatnot. Yeah.
right. But why not? I don't know, dragonfly wings or moth wings or butterfly wings
Yeah.
or bat wings. What is that too scary? Or what about wings the likes of which we couldn't even imagine? Right? We don't know. They're
Right.
just called wings, so it's natural for us to just go to an imagined vision. But again, that's just an example of how much we just sort of presuppose. So cherubim are described primarily in Ezekiel chapters 1 and 10 as having 4 wings and also 4 faces. So they are very different than angels. And they also don't deliver messages, as I said. They are in scholarly literature, they're typically referred to as throne guardians. And we do see them perform that sort of guardian role, even from the very first time they're mentioned, which incidentally is way back in Genesis. If you recall, they are stationed at the entrance to the Garden of Eden to
Yeah.
guard the way into it, right?
Mhm.
So there's a guardian role right there. And even when it talks about how there's a flaming sword with them, that word for sword is related etymologically to the word for cherub. So that's an interesting thing too. Guardianship, sword, And then in Ezekiel's visions, they are encircling God's throne. Is really what Ezekiel's seeing is a vision of an animated throne, right? And so
Yeah.
there they are
Mhm.
encircling him. And so it's important, okay? Notice how different now we get to know cherubim, how different they are from angels.
Yeah.
And this becomes really important. For example, think about the Ark of the Covenant. Again, the typical one you can imagine. What is on the top of it, on the mercy seat?
2 angels or 4 angels?
Okay.
Two.
See,
Which one?
the typical depiction you'll see is 2 human-like figures with 2 wings each, right? Well, that's not what's up there. The description in the Bible is that it's cherubim.
Yes.
This means 99% of every single depiction of the Ark of the Covenant you've seen is wrong. It's just flat out wrong. It needs to be 4 faces and 4 wings for it to be biblically accurate. See? So this is an example of why this kind of stuff is important. Because these are distinctions and they get us to understand what these beings are. So
It's
yeah,
interesting because even in some of the museums, let me show the picture real quick. This is the typical
yeah,
description
of
right here.
course. Come on, Ark of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, same thing.
Yeah. And since no one has, well, okay, I won't say no one has. I will say no one has seen the Ark of the Covenant in our ancient, I mean, not, sorry, modern time. So this is all we have. Rendering from someone's imagination.
Right. Yeah.
So, just, adding on to what you're saying there, because this is every time somebody brings it up, this is exactly what comes in my mind. That's
That's
why.
right.
Is it two or is it four? Is it? But I see the wings pointing towards each other. Yeah.
So true. What we actually have is a biblical description. So we need to be loyal to it and point out to these image makers, look, these are inaccurate. That's just all there is to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the book that you're pointing out there, Ezekiel. Many people don't read that book. So when I started digging into it, these depictions of the cherub were strange to me, obviously, because of what we're looking at here and what's been down through history. And when you go into Revelation, you hear about some creatures that are very weird. You got one with eyes all over its body or wings or something like that. And, so what we see is, not to bring you off on this rabbit trail, but what you see is a civilization in heaven, pretty much of things that we would deem as monsters, the way they're described.
True, definitely. So in other words, angels are very human-like, but cherubim are wholly other. They are just another category of being altogether.
Yeah. If you just joining in, this is Ken Ammi. This is his website, True Free Thinker. He's written a ton of books that you can go check out there. And we're on the trail of the paranormal theory of everything. And he's leading us where he's going to lead us tonight. So it's not scripted. I don't know exactly what we're going to talk about, but I'm pretty sure he does. All right, let's roll. Let's keep going.
Now, another example of why it's so important to get these things correct is I'll give you a real life example. When I was working on those books that you're showing right now, actually, and I was working on my Satanology along with then having, anyhow. So I thought about how the scripture says that Satan entered into Judas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, with the mindset that all these beings are actually physical, again, with their own kind of flesh, I thought about, well, gosh, how could Satan enter into Judas? And I spent days racking my brain about it. And I mean, I know I could say some fancy sounding stuff like, since he has access to other dimensions, then he could share the same physical airspace as another physical being. I mean, I could have come up with some interesting sounding stuff, I know. But my focus was, what does the Bible say? Does it tell me anything about how that could have possibly happened? And then I thought, well, wait a minute. Let's take this seriously and accurately. Because the fact is that Satan is not a fallen angel. He is not. He is a fallen cherub.
Yes.
Ezekiel 28:14. That's what he is. Mm-hmm. So now I got to think in terms of, okay, I'm thinking cherubim. What about cherubim do I know? And what you end up reading in Ezekiel is that the cherubim were accompanied by the Ophanim. Okay, that's what's generally translated as the wheels within wheels, right? And there it specifies how they're moving in unison. And then it tells you right there that the spirit of the cherubim were in the Ophanim, right? So the spirit of the cherubim were in the wheels within wheels. And I thought, there you have it. There's your answer. How could Satan enter Judas? Well, it tells us that cherubim have the ability to transfer their spirit into another object. And now I was very pleased at this because you find out I didn't have to invent anything. I'm just reading.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But again, I'm applying the details of what we're actually told to understanding things such as what did the ark look like, or in this case, how could Satan enter Judas? And the answers are right there in front of our faces.
Mhm.
It's that simple.
It's just like in the book of Revelation where Satan pretty much enters the Antichrist. You know, you have the same thing there. And what's peculiar about that, not to take you down another rabbit trail, is Satan enters the Antichrist, but yet, so we have the first beast and the second beast, Antichrist, false prophet. Satan enters the Antichrist, and yet we have three foul spirits coming out of him. That's the weird, one of the weirdest things I ever seen. Okay, so yeah,
It's
right.
like a counterfeit trinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
this too, by the way, when you think about 99% of the depictions you've ever seen of Satan, he's a
right,
cherub. He's a
yeah.
cherub. So if there goes all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is something eventually down the line tonight I hope to touch upon, but I'll just hint now that is it possible for him to appear as something he is not? That wouldn't surprise me. And some kind of illusion, right? Mental illusion.
Mm-hmm.
I could see that. I mean, I don't think we're told explicitly in the Bible, but I don't mind speculating when it's not too far off what we are told. So anyhow, well, we'll get back to that. Now
Like,
on to Seraphim.
before you go, I
Yes.
just want to have fun for a second. Give me a second, because this depiction of somewhat, they don't say it's Satan, but based on our artwork or whatnot, this movie, based on Philip K. Dick's novel.
Oh yeah.
What do we got? 13.
Yeah.
He's like 9 or 13 feet tall, something like that.
Oh yeah.
This is Childhood's End for anyone that doesn't know what I'm showing you here. This was a mini. Arthur C. Clarke, not Philip K. Dick. Arthur C. Clarke
Right.
wrote Childhood's End. It's very old, but they made a mini series on it, Sci-Fi Channel. And this thing, as you can see here, if I can get a large enough picture, he's escorting two children. This is when he reveals himself to the world. It mirrors a lot of stuff that actually is talked about in the book of Revelation, but taken on, they twist a lot of things. So anyway, I'm just having fun here because of the Catholic and other depictions of what we would call Satan. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, don't get me started on that story. I'm currently writing a book, and I'm going to review that series. By the way, that mini series.
Oh, that'll be great, because you know what? I'm studying it for my documentary. So
all right. So see, I'm telling you, we're like this.
We're on the same page.
One mind. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you want to get into Seraphim?
Seraphim. Now, Seraphim is a tough study because there's literally only one single text that talks about them. So I had to just dig into that one text like you wouldn't believe, just to try to derive anything I could from it. So that's Isaiah 6. And they're described as having 6 wings.
Mm-hmm.
And although they use 2 to cover their faces, so we don't know what they look like. They use 2 to cover their feet or their nether regions. So, okay, we know they have feet. And then one of them reaches out to grab a fiery coal, so we know they have hands. I mean, I think it would be fair enough to just picture a basic humanoid body with 6 wings. That seems to be about all that's being implied.
Something like this?
I think that's fair enough.
Fair enough. Something more, like something kind of, sort of. Still got bird wings, but yeah.
Yeah, and maybe they do. I mean, maybe they do.
Maybe. But they, if I'm correct, from what I've read, maybe I've missed something, they surround God's throne and sing "Holy, Holy, Holy" all day long. Is that the end of their description?
Well, that is one of their functions. Now,
Yeah.
a lot of people claim that they are reptilian.
Okay.
Now, the text doesn't describe them as being reptilian whatsoever.
Mm.
However, the issue is the term seraph, okay, which is also one of the words that's used of snakes or serpents. Right now, Nakash is one of the words for snake or serpent, but so is seraph.
Uh-huh.
That's why people claim that they're serpentine or reptilian. And yet, the more I looked at it, the more I came to realize, well, okay, now we have various terms, right? Snake, serpent, viper, and then you get into the different subcategories. So it's just common in every language to have various words for things that are the same or slightly different. And seraph really refers to what you'll generally run across as being fiery serpents. Okay, such as when God sent such snakes to the people of Israel as a punishment, and they bit them, and people died, and that's when Moses ended up making that serpent and put it on a pole, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it became quite clear that they're referred to as fiery, not because there's some kind of a reptile crawling around that's on flames, but because due to their bite, their venomous bite would feel like a burning sensation, right? That's why they're called fiery. So it's really the venomous ones that are generally called seraph.
Mm.
And so then I thought about, well, what are the seraphim doing? Yes, they are singing, Kodesh, Kodesh, Kodesh all day long, holy, holy, holy. But then what do? One of them ends up going up to the burning coals, grabbing one, remember, and touching Isaiah's mouth to cleanse him. And so I ended up calling them the keepers of the eternal flame. So there's something about them and their connection to the flame that's before God's throne. So that I saw as being part of their job function. And then so that made sense when then I thought about, okay, fiery burning serpent from the pain of the sting of the bite to the seraph likely being referred to as such because they have something to do with the fire in the temple that's in before God's presence. See that?
Yeah.
So to me, that again, I don't have to do very much except to read the various texts and put them together to end up with that kind of conclusion. Okay, I know that in nowadays, especially online, it would be more exciting for me to claim that they're reptilian, and then I can tie that into all kinds of conspiracies. But I mean, I just couldn't help it. I mean, that's where my research led me.
Yeah.
Seraph didn't have to do with being a reptile. It had to do with fire or burning or flames. And also because like I just did this, right? When a serpent scurries across the ground, they look like a flame, right? It's the same kind of thing.
Gotcha.
I mean, the symbolism just plays off of each other.
Yeah. So the simpler we keep it, the more accurate we are.
And like I said, I don't mind then going on to speculate, but it has to be based on what we know, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then also how now we understand why these are different categories of being. Like I said before, different titles, different job functions, and they look different from one another. Yeah. So if someone insists that seraphim and cherubim are types of angels, why? Why not claim that angels and cherubim are all types of seraphim, or that angels or seraphim are all types of cherubim? Why arbitrarily categorize them as angels when they're obviously not? So anyhow, it's kind of like a systematic theology type of thing where we're being systematic about it. We're going down the line, getting our ducks in a row, and then everything kind of works together therefrom, right?
Yeah, it's like a science. You're going to gather all the evidence and make the conclusion.
Right.
So something I wanted to ask you, it's slipping my mind now. Something about seraphims. It'll come back. Can't remember. Anyway.
You know what? I'm going to give you some live advice. This is why whenever I'm doing an interview or something, paper and pen right next to me, because I know I'll think of something. Oh, well, then you have to write it down, right? You got to make yourself a little note. And then, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You can't forget to write the note.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm trying to be on these graphics, trying to intently listen to you, and then there it goes. So for anybody that's just joined us, he explained about angels, what angel really mean. Most of you know they are just messengers. It's not their species, it's their title. It's like Jesus Christ. Christ isn't Jesus' last name, the title. Okay. So he explained that. And then we went into cherubs, and pretty much they are not the same. And if you go into Ezekiel and other passages, you'll see that. And so now we're on seraphim. And now I know. I got you. Somebody asked a question. That's what it was. Someone said, "Did Satan guards God's throne?" I have my own answer, but I want you to go ahead and answer that.
This would be speculation, but since he's a cherub, then logically he would have. He is in Ezekiel 28 referred to as having been an anointed cherub.
Mm-hmm.
So he was once a loyal doer of his duty. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's one answer for you guys. When I think of do you know anything about this? Okay, so here goes another person. So the first person was Carrie Collar. I think that's how you spell it. Or say it. Jane Shell said, "When I think of a cherub, I think of them being small. That's what we have always been shown. Do you know anything about their size?"
No, we're not told, but I would imagine that thinking of them as small is because usually what we see as cherubs as little babies with wings. I mean, that's probably why. And by the way, these majestic, multidimensional, four-winged, four-faced beings seeing themselves depicted as chubby little babies with wings, that must be something else, They must be like, oy vey, I can't believe these humans.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Where do they get this stuff? So no, we know the size of angels because they look like human males. We're not told about the size of cherubim and seraphim. So I don't know. Could we speculate that they're about our size? I don't see why not. I mean, I don't see any description of their size, just kind of basics about what they look like.
Yeah. And, sometimes we take speculation and run with it as truth. I've done it before. Okay. And a lot of us do it.
Haven't we all? Sure.
Not going to actually do our own research. Right. So one of the descriptions of angels, and I'm not saying this is false or I've done the research, but maybe Ken can help us here, is that most angels are about 13, 14 feet tall. That's one of them out there. That's one of the theories. What do you think?
I know of no indication of that whatsoever.
There you go. I haven't seen it in the Bible.
No.
So let's see here.
Again, just like we're not told they shapeshift or morph and take on bodies, we're also not told that they're unusual in height.
Gotcha. And I think some of that is coming from the aspect of what we'll get into later, the Nephilim versus Raphaim and all that.
Right.
Let's see here. Doesn't the Hebrew translate? Doesn't the Hebrew translation refer to all the unseen realm, holy and unholy, as angels?
Well, no, definitely not. This is why we have different words like malakim, cherubim, seraphim, right? That's right there in the text. So they are distinguished for us, not only in, like I said, title and job function and the way they look. Yeah,
okay.
They're definitely distinguished.
Yeah. Thank you, Carrie Kaler.
Yeah, no, that was a good question because it allows for detailing. Yeah, that's important.
All right. That's the last question for now. So where are we going next?
Next, it seems as if we have to start getting into Nephilim territory because we inevitably end up having to think about what are demons. Mm-hmm. And for me, that begins with Genesis 6.
Yeah. Let me bring up that text there.
Yeah,
Genesis
okay.
6. For those that are participating and have no idea what we're talking about, there is something in the Bible called Genesis 6. Hey, fun fact, Genesis is not the first book of the Bible. Job is. But anyway, that's just a fun fact. So here we go, Genesis 6, and take us there.
Okay, so Genesis 6 is famous and infamous because within 4 verses, you can get into extremely complicated and detailed issues. So let me just take a step back and explain something. I sat down and I wanted to understand everything the Bible said about everything paranormal. Okay, so there's God and then there's earth dwellers, but then there's this whole in between realm, right?
Mhm.
So I wanted to know everything the Bible said about those beings. And I wrote a book about all of that. And when I was done, I thought, this is a bit much
Yeah.
because it was just so much
Mhm.
that I broke it up into a book series. So
Right.
now it's what does the Bible say about angels, and then a separate book on demons, separate book on Satan, separate book on various other lesser spoken of beings, and another one on Nephilim. And so that I think made it more digestible.
Yeah.
And so here in Genesis 6, do you want to just read through 1 through 4?
Sure. And it came to
Okay.
pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always thrive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bear children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown.
So you see what happens is in that little tiny bit of text, all of a sudden you're having to wonder, well, who are the sons of God? Who are the daughters of men? Who are the Nephilim? Who are the they're men of old, men of renown. And so each one of those questions can take you into very complicated and detailed directions. So this little passage here has resulted in literally millennia worth of discussion, commentary, and debates. Millennia's worth.
Mhm.
So it's, and part of it is because it's so succinct, it's somewhat vague. And then, so people like to jump on stuff like this, sometimes to write historical fiction, sometimes to make a name for themselves. Well, I know I have the secret gnosis, right?
Mhm.
About what this is, or whatever. People just do all kinds of stuff. So we've had millennia's worth of discussions about this. So now the first issue, of course, who are the sons of God? And I'll just give you a shortcut, two shortcuts to understanding that. One is that if you go to Job 28, verse 7, he mentions that the sons of God, at the very least, witness the creation of the earth. So they can't be humans, point blank. So that's pretty simple right there.
There you go.
And yeah,
Mhm. Uh,
now
yeah, go ahead.
the other is the historical issue. So I wrote a book called On the Genesis 6 Affairs, Sons of God, Angels or Not. And really that whole book is just about almost an entire millennia's worth of Jewish and Christian commentary and who took which view, right? There's the angel view, the Sethite view, and then a view I call miscellaneous.
Okay.
And that's all it was, is from BC days to AD days, almost into the 500s AD. I just show you who took which view.
Mhm.
And the angel view is the traditional, the original, and the majority view amongst both Jews and Christians. And you know, when Jews and Christians agree on anything, it behooves us to pay attention, right?
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, just very, very quickly, the view that this refers to a holy or righteous line of Seth versus an unholy or wicked line of Cain. The first problem is that's unbiblical. That's just a myth. There's no such thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it was Sethites and Cainites, then it would just be strange. Why is it only male Sethites and only female Cainites?
Yeah.
That seems just almost a little too perfect, right?
Good question.
Yeah. And so if you applying what we know about angels helps us understand this. So for one, why is it only male sons of God? Because angels are male. There you go. So why is it strictly female daughters of men? Because since angels are male, then they need females, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
just, there you go. It's
Yeah.
that basic.
Yeah.
And now, how could angels mate with human women? Because again, angels have a flesh of their own and they look just like males. So why wouldn't they be able to do that? Now, at this point, I'm going to pause and point out that a lot of people will say, well, but Jesus said, and then they'll generally paraphrase something such as, he said angels don't get married. He said angels are genderless. He said angels don't have sex.
Mm-hmm.
He said no such thing, actually. Jesus is very specific when he's talking about angels. He says that in the resurrection, human beings will be like the angels. We will not marry nor be given in marriage. But what he does is that he specifies that he's talking about the angels of God in heaven. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that's an important qualifier because, right, he's talking about the loyal angels who don't marry and they're not given in marriage, which is why the ones who did so are considered sinners, as Jude puts it, having left their first estate. Okay, so taking Jesus at his word within his qualified statements, that's what he said. He said the angels in heaven don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's important.
I got one to interject.
Yes.
When the pre-incarnate Jesus came with the two angels, or whatever you want to call them, to Abraham, they ate, and then, after Abraham had the long diatribe with Jesus about who's righteous in Sodom and Gomorrah, he sent these two physical beings to Sodom and Gomorrah to rescue Lot. And these people, men, women, and children, wanted to have physical sex with them. So there's a lot of physicality going on there.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Right. And so that would what we know about angels makes this text make sense. Okay. And the fact that they were able to mate and have children doesn't mean that they were meant to or supposed to do that. Right. So sometimes I liken it to me. Okay. I could mate with every single woman on the planet. But I'm married, so I'm not to do that. That would be a sin.
Yeah.
Right? Just like them. They were not supposed to do that. Now, an issue sometimes comes up about but God said that things reproduce after their own kind. So how could angels mate with humans? But again, taking what we know about angels, that they look just like human males, and we are made a little lower than them, then I would go as far as saying that we're of the same kind. It's just that we're not supposed to be mixing with them. Just like, I'm the same kind as every woman on the planet, but I'm not supposed to mix with them except for one, which is my wife, right?
Another good example, maybe not as good as yours, I don't know, but wolf and a dog, pretty much almost the same. Because
they're both canines.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're right. There's many examples like that in nature, aren't they?
Yeah.
Aren't there? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we end up with something called Nephilim, and they became mighty and well known, right? Men of old, men of renown. Okay. So what do we do with that? So the question becomes that this field of research, especially at the pop level, right, at the popular level, about Nephilim and quote unquote giants, I'm going to dare to say is a cesspool of misinformation and disinformation.
Mm.
And
So the paradigm is about to shift here.
it needs to shift if we're biblically serious and we're not interested in weaving what I call theo sci-fi tall tales.
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
so what do we know about Nephilim? Okay, they were extremely tall, so we can call them giants. And they were called by many different names, such as Rephaim, and they're related to humans. That's why they're related to Anakim. And they somehow managed to make it through the flood in one form or another. And they'll play a role in the eschaton, right, in the end times or last days. There's a slight problem with all that stuff I just mentioned, which is that it's all unbiblical.
Mm. I got you. I get you.
So, first of all, they lived pre-flood, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're told specifically only 8 people and some animals survived the flood.
Yeah.
Well, then that's the end of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now, for the people who claim they survived, you need to choose between God's word or yours at that point.
Mm.
But there's some that say, well, no, they didn't survive. They just somehow managed to return after the flood, right?
Yeah.
And because the Bible doesn't say anything about that, then they have to literally invent stories about how that could have been. Well, more angels fell after the flood and did it all again. Or Nephilim genetics made it through the flood within the bodies of one of Noah's son's wives. Those are like the 2 most popular options. Again, the problem is the Bible states no such thing.
So let me play devil's advocate for a second. So you're saying they all died off in the flood, but come on, Ken. It said there were giants in the world after that. Come on now. Something
Right.
happened. What
Something
happened?
happened. So we'll get there.
All right.
We'll get there. At the moment, I just want to try to get our bearings.
Okay. All right.
Which is okay. So, for instance, most of the pop researchers will say that, well, at least one of the reasons for the flood was because God wanted to be rid of the Nephilim, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if they made it past the flood in any way, shape, or form, either by surviving or genetically or by more angels falling or any means you could imagine, that implies that God failed.
Mm.
God meant to be rid of them, but he couldn't get the job done. And they thought of some kind of loophole that God missed. That's the implication.
Okay.
Right. So that's a major issue right there. Now, we need to talk, and I'm going to get into some detail here if you don't mind, because the fact is the term Nephilim occurs 3 times in the whole entire Bible.
Okay.
Once pre-flood in Genesis 6 and twice post-flood in Numbers 13, verse 33. Okay, so that verse states, this is when the Israelites are about to go into the land of Israel, and they say, there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim, and we seem to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seem to them. Okay, see that? So now we have post-flood Nephilim, we have related to humans, and we have that they're extremely tall. It's right there in the Bible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but it's not good enough to say it's in the Bible or Moses wrote it or God inspired it, because what we also get in the Bible is statements recorded of things that Satan said. So yeah, we're supposed to believe Satan said them, but we're not supposed to believe the actual statements, right? Because he's a liar and the father of lies.
Right.
So let me take a couple minutes here to go over the narrative of chapter 13, not just pick up verse 33 and then run with it, right? Just pick up that verse and then go and plug it into any kind of theory that you like. So here's the breakdown of the situation, which really is verse 25 through 33. Okay.
Where are we now? Sorry.
Numbers 13.
Numbers 13.
And if you go to verse 25, this is when the spies that were sent in to reconnoiter the land, this is when they return, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They returned to the group. They came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the people of Israel. And here's what they say. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation, and they showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are well fortified and very large. Besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there, right? The Anakim.
Yeah.
The Amalekites dwell in the land of Negeb. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it.
Mm-hmm.
Then the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim, and we seem to ourselves like grasshoppers, so we seem to them. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Now that's the narrative we really need to unpack.
Yeah.
Because you see that there's almost like three acts, right? There's the initial report that I call the as-is report, because it's just accepted as is. They come back, they say, here's what we saw. Great, no problem. Then there's the interaction between Caleb, and we end up finding out that Joshua sided with Caleb. Caleb and then the other guys are having this little dispute, and then another report is presented, which is called bad or evil in most translations. So that's really important. Now notice a few things here. The first thing they do when they come back to camp is not that they're running into the camp yelling, OMG, you'll never believe what we just saw. Or, the ancient equivalent of OMG, like OM Yud or whatever. You'll never believe it. We saw Nephilim. They're absolutely gigantic. Oh, no. No. First thing they do is, hey, check out this fruit. That's just not commonsensical. That if you saw the most outlandish beings on the planet, your first concern would be, hey, check out this fruit. That's just odd. Okay. Maybe it's just me. I grant it. It's just odd. Okay. Check out the fruit. You're kidding me? Then they talk about the land. Oh, it flows with milk and honey. Okay. But that was in the original report. It's a good land. It flows with milk and honey. But then look at their evil report, their bad report. The land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. Okay, that's a contradiction right there. They just straight up contradicted themselves. Okay. And then notice, at first they say that the people of the land are strong. And even after they're answering to what Caleb said, they say we're not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. But after we're told that they present a bad report, all of a sudden they say, all the people we saw in it are of great height. Okay, well, that's an embellishment right there, straight up. You twice pointed out that they're strong and they're strong. Oops, you forgot to mention that they're all of great height. That's an embellishment.
Mm.
Okay. Now, you'll notice they mentioned every people group they saw. Sons of Anak,
Yeah.
Amalekites, Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Canaanites. All of a sudden, it's only within the bad report that they go, oh, oopsie, forgot to mention the most notable people group on the planet. Oh, yeah, we also saw Nephilim?
Mm.
Are you kidding me? That would have been the first thing anyhow. And notice, too, they're able to pinpoint where they saw these people, right?
Mm.
Amalekites dwell in the Negev. Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites dwell in hill country. Canaanites still dwell by the sea and the Jordan. But when they mention the Nephilim, they do not specify where the Nephilim are. So that's a missing data point right there.
Interesting.
They can't be that specific. And I submit to you, it's because they didn't actually see Nephilim.
Mm.
So the way this breaks down is they present a report. But you have to understand historical and cultural context. This is a band of itinerant wilderness tent dwellers, okay?
Mm.
Now they're coming into this land and they're seeing location after location where there's big, well-fortified cities that are being protected by strong people. That is at the very least intimidating, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, God had commanded them to do it. So, but you could tell the people are scared already because it tells us that Caleb quieted the people. So he's like, whoa, take it easy, right?
Yeah.
Let's go up at once. We're able to overcome it because God had commanded them to. But then it's the other spies who said, we are not able to do it, right? And these guys, the way I'm going to put it is they were so scared by the situation that then they just make up a tall tale. And it is no surprise that this is right when the narration tells us, then they presented an evil report or a bad report.
Mm.
Now, a lot of people say it's called a bad report because they were being disloyal and unfaithful to God. And yes, they were. But the problem, too, is the content of the evil report because they contradict themselves. They embellish it. They miss data points. And they make 3 claims about which the whole entire Bible knows nothing. 1, that there's post-flood Nephilim. 2, that Anakim are related to Nephilim. 3, that Nephilim are very, very, very tall. That doesn't exist anywhere else in the whole entire Bible.
Mm.
So to believe those things, you have to believe unfaithful, disloyal, rebuked spies who are set to present a bad report, contradict themselves, embellish, and they contradict Moses, Caleb, Joshua, God, and the rest of the Bible, because all of them point out that Anakim were in the land, but none of them say a word about Nephilim ever, not once.
Yeah.
So you have to believe some of the most unreliable people around to believe those things, not to mention, mentioning that this is the reason the Israelites were made to wander the wilderness for another 4 decades.
Yeah.
It's because of this event.
Mm.
And one more note on this, 2 actually. In Deuteronomy 1:28, Moses is relating this event, and he does mention that these spies did frighten the people, and they claimed that all the inhabitants of the land were of great height, and that they saw the Anakim there. He doesn't even mention Nephilim. He doesn't mention it, as if he understood this is just a put on. This is not something he saw. He doesn't even bother relating that part of it. And
True.
now, textually, there's another oddity that if you read in the Septuagint, the Greek LXX, for this verse, it mentions what it calls gigantes, but it doesn't mention Anakim. So that's just, there's a strange textual issue going on there. So anyhow, no matter how you slice it or dice it, that's why I was saying you cannot just pick up verse 33 and run with it. because then you feel free to just make of it and plug it in everywhere that you want. But it's extremely problematic from a commonsensical level to a textual level to a theological level to every level you could imagine.
Yeah.
It's just problematic.
Well, what's interesting is that, I mean, we have a lot of people today writing Nephilim books. And
Including me.
yes.
I think
And
I've written like 4 or 5.
yeah. And so the thing that I find interesting, I'm not, attacking anybody. I'm just pointing something out. They say that they hold to a classic hermeneutic. For those that you don't know, that's interpretation, literal, grammatical, historical. But what you just pointed out here, straight from that hermeneutic, right? So it goes now into eisegesis. For those that don't know, that's you reading your own thoughts into the text instead of reading out what the text is actually saying. So it's something important to keep in mind when reading the books that we are reading, and going back to the text and seeing who's faulty and who's not. Go ahead.
That is incredibly important what you just said, because when you think about it, the entire post-Nephilim theory, especially the way it's being put out there today, like I said, in terms of theo-sci-fi, which, by the way, is extremely exciting. If these were being made into high-tech movies, they would be absolutely fascinating and wonderful. But when you're claiming you're doing theology, it's a problem. But what happens is people will pick up that one verse and then build an entire all-encompassing theory on that one verse. And then that one verse becomes a hermeneutic, a worldview, right? And then what they start doing is misreading other texts and pulling them into this grand narrative. I'll give you a good example right now. So you read Genesis 6:4, where it talks about that Nephilim were in the earth in those days and also afterward, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure you've heard, I'm going to put you on the spot. And what have you heard about what that means?
That there was a second incursion.
Yeah. Okay. So it's post-flood. It's talking about those days before the flood and afterward after the flood, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we're told a million times. But how come the text doesn't say that?
Yeah.
This is verse 4, okay? The flood isn't even mentioned for the very first time until verse 17, a full 13 verses later. So, no, you don't get to read ahead and then circle back and plug it in. So the question is there an immediate context, manner in which to understand what days it's being referred to?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's right there. It tells us the Nephilim were in the earth in those days and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men and bore children to them. Now, when was that? Well, verse 1 told us, when men began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men, and so on. And, well, when was that? I have no idea. I mean, it could be as early as when Adam and Eve's children started having children, but the point being, they were there in those days when the sons of God first did this, and also after they first did this, but that's all pre-flood.
Yeah.
Because they didn't survive the flood, and because you can appeal to Jude and 2 Peter for this, besides a few other texts. There's only a one-time sin or fall of angels recorded in the Bible. So there goes that whole thing. So those days when they first did it, after they first did it, yeah, they just kept on doing it.
Yeah.
But the flood is a wall they do not penetrate. They don't return. They never did, and they never will.
Interesting. Because that's what's the story now. But let me point out a couple things. We always see on this program, I don't care who I have on, all due respect to Ken here, go and do your research. We're researching right now in front of you. So if you find what we're saying faulty, then you have a problem, right? Do your own research. Let me give you an exciting um, introduction to something here. And can you, if I'm wrong, you let me know. So you have Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel. Cain, gets punished by God, and he goes out and he finds a wife. And people are like, wait a minute, how do you find a wife? There are no other humans on the planet. Come on now, that's Adam and Eve's first children, right? That's the assumption, right? But how do you know that's Adam and Eve's first children? When you go into Genesis 10, I believe, there's a lineage from Adam, and Cain and Abel are not even mentioned. So now you have a problem, and you have to figure it out going back into scripture. What do you think?
I think you're very much correct. And I'll say this much. Could Cain and Abel have been the first two children? Sure, why not? But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. It could be that they are specifically mentioned because something momentous happened, something notable happened with them. So, for instance, obviously, we're told Adam and Eve had many children, many sons and many daughters. How come we're not told stories about all of them? Because the scripture wants to tell us about something specific that happened with Cain, Abel, and then Seth. So could they have been the first three? Yeah, why not? But it's not necessarily so. But the thing I always turn to is if you just look at Genesis chapter 5, generation after generation after generation passes in that chapter. It records a number of them. So yeah, I mean, just because every step of the lineage isn't given in a story about them doesn't mean it wasn't happening. Yeah, right there you have multiple generations being recorded very quickly. I mean, one verse to the next.
Yeah, 5, not 10.
So there were plenty of people around.
Yeah, I made a mistake right there. I said it was Genesis 10. So see, always make sure you double check. All right. So yeah, here it is. The lineage right there. I mean, God is picking out a lot of things in history that's important to his doxological purpose, basically to bring himself glory, tell a narrative that he's weaving so we understand the nature of humanity and historically too. So he picks out imagine if the Bible had the entire history of man. You'd never finish it, right? So he's very important points of reference so that we can get from all the way from the fall to where he picked Abraham and so on until the book of Revelation. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think we should talk about quote unquote giants and like you had mentioned Rephaim and then get to demons because that's when we'll get to the paranormal theory of everything.
Yes, sir. Take us on the trip.
Now, as far as Nephilim, Genesis 6 does not provide us a physical description of them, right?
Right.
Numbers 13 provides us their height, but that is to be considered absolutely unreliable for the many reasons I outlined. Therefore, we do not have a reliable physical description of Nephilim. We don't. And so we can't claim they were even 1 inch taller than average.
Interesting.
And as I point out various times, I think it'd be delicious if it turns out that they were little people. But
so you're telling me that this chart isn't real? Come on.
You know what? In my book, What Does the Bible Say About Giants and Nephilim? I go through that chart. I examined every single one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And the grade I give it is failing. The only really accurate one is the average human.
Okay.
Anyhow, I have a whole chapter. I talk about each one of those, and it's problematic. That is a problem right there.
All right.
Yeah.
So
so when it comes to Nephilim themselves, we know that they were mighty. We know they were well known. We don't know exactly how or why or what they did, but okay, that's about all we know about them. And so then let's get into giants. And I always say quote unquote because we must recognize, first of all, we are now switching to an English term, right? We're talking about Nephilim, which is a Hebrew term. And now we're switching to an English word. And it is a fact that the term giant is generic, it's vague, it's subjective, and it's undefined. I can't tell you how many times people want to jump into a discussion with me about giants, and I have to stop them and say, well, I could think of 5 or 6 definitions of giant. What do you mean by that? Right? How can we talk about giants without defining the term?
Sort of like the term God.
So let's just dig into etymology a little bit, right? So, there's arguments about what does Nephilim mean. I would say technically it doesn't matter because there's what's known as the word concept fallacy. So, for example, I've been called a giant many times in my life, many times. My wife does it constantly.
Yeah.
She calls me a giant regularly, okay? Does the fact that that word is being applied to me mean that I'm taller than average? And if so, how much taller than average? Or is it like super unusual? Are my entire body lengths taller than average? Or a few feet taller than average? Or a few inches taller than average? So you see, just the word alone doesn't do the job. We need to talk about what it means, right?
Yeah.
So let's just pause there for a second. What the word means doesn't necessarily tell you anything about the being, the person. It might, but not necessarily. So, if Nephilim as a word comes from a Hebrew root, nephal, then it's generally thought to be to mean fall or to fall or fallen, something like that, right? Except other people argue that it actually comes from an Aramaic root, nafilah. And now here is where I kind of just say, you know what, let the experts fight it out, because you have qualified scholars who say, well, nafilah means giant. And then you have qualified scholars who say, no, it doesn't. So what do you want me to do? You know, what I can do is that if a scholar tells me that Nephilah means giant, that only begs the question, well, then what does giant mean? And again, it's not that simple. Is it a few inches taller than average? Is it a few feet? Is it a few entire body lengths? Is it metaphorical? Like, oh, he's a giant of industry.
Right.
It's not that simple. Okay. But so let's see. A big part of the problem here is that the Greek translation of the scriptures, the Septuagint or LXX, rendered, I can't even say translated, they rendered the term Nephilim and Rephaim and Giborim all as gigantes. And it's generally just a terrible idea to render more than one word using just one word.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know why they did that, point blank. We just don't. But in my mind, that caused a tremendous amount of problems. Not to mention, I keep saying not to mention right before mentioning it. I guess that's how people generally use that term. Anyhow. So, Giborim, I couldn't even tell you how many of the pop researchers on this stuff will talk about the Giborim as if it's a people group, and it's not. It's just a descriptive term that means might or mighty. That's it.
Yeah.
And so when you read that the Nephilim were the Orthodoxes of also after that, blah, 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 these were the mighty men of old, the men of renown. Okay, that's Gibor right there. They were the mighty men. They were the Giborim. So it's just telling us that they were mighty. But in Greek, it reads that the gigantes became gigantes, which just logically and linguistically, it doesn't make sense because you don't become something you already are. So that's one of the problems with rendering Giborim as gigantes and also Nephilim as gigantes. So
Yeah.
anyhow,
So that's why when I watched this TV show, Runaways, I saw Church of the Gibborim
look
there,
at that.
and because of modern day whatever dealing with giants, you think this is the Church of the Giants, but there's nothing in this entire series, even the comic books, that has anything to do with that. This is a connotation to anything giant. So then now you have to pull back and say, what do they really mean? You know.
Yeah,
So we have
it would
Gibborim Studios.
biblically it would have to mean Church of the Mighty, or Mighty Studios. I mean, biblically, that's what it means.
Yeah. And then it goes into Nimrod, and some people say, well, he became a Nephilim.
Right, except that's not in the Bible anywhere. Why do they say that? Because it says that Nimrod became a Gibor. Well, yeah, he was a regular guy, and then he became a mighty person. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all it is.
A mighty hunter before the Lord. Is that it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. A Gibor hunter. I mean, but you can't then say, Nimrod became Gibor, and Nephilim were described as Gibborim, therefore he became a Nephil. No, you can't do that, because Gibor is applied to Nephilim, yes, and then it's applied to regular people like Nimrod and Boaz, and it's applied of angels. And guess what? Even God himself. I'm sure you've heard the name of God, El Gibor, right? I mean, so that's all it means. So if you're claiming Nimrod became a Nephil because he became a Gibor and Nephilim are Gibborim, then you have to say that God became a Nephil by the same logic.
Right.
It doesn't work. No,
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah. See, this is why we have to do serious study into this stuff.
Right.
Especially when it comes to the Bible, because it's so important, because we're all accountable to what we teach and how we lead people. Okay. So you want to do serious study, find out what the words mean. And sometimes, like if you go into the gap theory, you have, what is it called? Toe and bohu, something like that. Anyway, it doesn't mean the same thing all the time. When you find these two words, it can mean something else in another context. It's just like how I'm cool. Ken is cool too, but Ken could be cold and I'm just a cool person. Words change, so we have to.
We're both chill.
Yeah. There you go. Even that, we're both chill. Or, yo, that's dope. No, we're not really meaning literal cocaine or anything like that. Okay, so we have to figure this out, and that's why we have. Listen, we're living in an age where we have so many resources to study our word, and the interpretation method is first, and then get into the interpretation and make sure you don't go off into strange things because of the way you want to interpret it. That's why we have so many problems today. And even on this one thing called giants, you see what we've pulled out of the woodwork today. So again, do serious research. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, for those of you making comments, I apologize that I can't really read them, because it's hard enough to just listen and talk and read the texts of scripture that I can't really look at them, and I apologize. But just now I was able to read some, and I just want to comment on, someone says, I heard Nephilim means water demon. I never have. I couldn't even imagine how one would derive that. Etymologically or just definitionally from the historical context, grammatical context, immediate context, greater context. I don't see how that would work. Then Carrie says, so Nimrod, per your understanding, he simply became a mighty human hunter. Do you mean whether he hunted humans or that he was a human who hunted? Where he's just called a hunter. And no, there's no indication his DNA began to change. That's just a modern day theo sci-fi. Again, is just telling us that Nimrod became mighty, and the next thing that's said about them is that he established all these kingdoms, so that you see that's how he became mighty. It had nothing to do with his genetics or height or anything. How did he become mighty? Well, he became a ruler and an establisher of all these kingdoms, so that's it. Now, she also said the spirits of the dead Nephilim became the Rephaim. Okay, we'll get to that in a roundabout way. Let's get to that. So back to the issue of the word giant. Now, the problem is English versions that follow the Greek just took gigantes and then they use the English word giant. Okay. Now, as a word, the word giant originally, it doesn't imply anything about height whatsoever. Because again, it's based on gigantes, and gigantes means earthborn. That's it. That's all it means, earthborn. The issue here becomes that people will say, well, the Titans of Greek mythology are described as being earthborn. They're called gigantes. So therefore, if Nephilim are referred to as gigantes, they must have been very, very tall, because Titans were very, very tall. There's a few problems there. One is there's not just one generation of Titans in Greek mythology. So for example, the third generation of Titans, I mean, they have 100 hands. They have the upper body of a human and the lower body of a serpent, all kinds of crazy chimeras, right? And then you can't be myopic enough to just say, I want to pull out of there what fits my theory, again, being eisegetical, and claim that Titans were gigantes, Nephilim are gigantes, therefore they're both very, very, very tall. Because how do you know that if the correlation is to Titans, how do you know Nephilim aren't being referred to as gigantes because both of them were hybrids, or because both of them were tyrannical, or because of any other correlation that you could draw between them that has nothing to do with height? So be careful about that. Don't just say, hey, I want to turn out with incredibly tall Nephilim, so that's all I'm going to look at. I'm just going to pick this one option. You can't just do that. So the English versions follow the Septuagint, and you have the word giant all over the Bible. So people have told me many, many, many times, but there's giants all over the Old Testament. Well, okay, but wait a minute. You need to look at the Hebrew behind it, because of the many times the word giant occurs in the English Old Testament, only 3 times is the Hebrew behind it Nephilim. Again, Genesis 6:4 and twice in Numbers 13:33. Every other time, it's either rendering Repha or Rephaim. Okay? And so now we get into the issue of, but Rephaim are just another hybrid race, or they are just another name that was used of Nephilim. That doesn't exist in the Bible. It just doesn't. It doesn't. The issue is that the root word Repha has a notoriously wide range of meaning, all the way from healing to death. And so it can mean these descriptions, right? It can be used to mean healing. It can be used to mean death, but it's also used as the title of a people group. So that's what's really important to keep in mind. That there's this main category of people group called Rephaim, under which there are subcategories such as Anakim. Like Anakim are a subgroup of Rephaim. Incidentally, so that means even if beyond all reason you actually want to believe the statement in Numbers 13:33, you still can't get Rephaim related to Nephilim. You only get a subgroup of Anakim related to them. Just incidentally. It's important, though. And so what are we told about Rephaim? Well, some of them are tall. I mean, I don't know how that's really impressive. especially when you think, just like the word giant, the word tall or even great stature, it's vague, it's generic, it's subjective. Okay, so let's think about something for a moment. Hebrew or Israelite males of those days, they average 5 foot even or 5'3", right around there. So to them, someone who's 6 foot tall or 6'5" or 7 foot tall, yeah, they would be impressively tall. They would be of great height, but it's still nothing really unusual. So really, when it comes down to it, the issue of height is biblically a non-issue. The Bible gives us two specific heights. Two, that's it. One is a Hebrew man who is 7'5", just going by the standard cubit, and the other is Goliath. Now, the issue with Goliath is there's a textual issue. I'll just go through it very quickly. The Greek manuscripts have him as being just shy of 10 feet. But the Hebrew ones, including the Dead Sea Scrolls and even the comments by Flavius Josephus, have him being just shy of 7 feet, which I think is the accurate one. Because the thing is, the standard Hebrew cubit was less than the standard Egyptian one. And the Septuagint was being translated in Alexandria, Egypt. So it seems to me they were using the longer Egyptian cubit, and instead of actually doing the calculation from the Hebrew one, they just swapped it. Okay, well, it says this many cubits, that to us it's this many cubits. They didn't actually do the calculations. They just swapped it out. But anyhow, and then you get into the issue of, well, but how can essentially people that are, 6-7 feet tall handle this heavy weaponry, spear like a weaver's beam and all that? Well, you can get yourself on a video channel anytime you want. Look up weightlifting or powerlifting or strongman competitions, and you'll see guys that are right around 6 foot tall lifting 1,000 pounds. You don't have to be extremely tall to do that. Not to mention again. In fact, the Egyptian man who was 7'5" was said to use a spear like a weaver's beam, except one of David's soldiers, just a regular guy, attacked him with a club, and then he took that spear and used it to kill him. So a regular sized guy could wield one of those spears in battle. So, I mean, again, that's just not really. I love those shoes, by the way, those slippers.
Yeah,
that would be cozy in the winter, bare head slippers. Yeah, that's nice.
Oh boy.
Then the only other thing you get beyond that, referring to height, is really metaphors. So, for instance, Amos referring to the Amorites as being as strong as oaks. Now, I don't know anybody who would hear that and say, I know. What Amos is implying is that we should conduct a ratio-based calculation between the strength of an oak and the strength of a person. Nobody thinks that. But because he also said their height is as the height of the cedars, then all of a sudden, ooh, this is exciting. Let's find out how tall the cedar tree is, and then we'll claim that's what Amos is telling us. That's how tall the Ammonites are. Instead of just reading it as is, which is they were big and strong. Yeah, they were big and strong.
Yeah.
Okay. There's really, that's the bottom line. If you keep the speculation out of it, and especially if you keep but I want to build a case for some odd reason for very, very, very tall beings. And then the other one to mention is King Og of Bashan, right? Og. He was Og, the OG, he was the original gangster. Well, what we're often told about him is that he was 12 or 13 feet tall. But how could you know that if the Bible never mentions his height? It doesn't.
It only mentions the bed that he slept on.
Yeah, well, you went a little too far. You said it mentions the bed that he slept on. Oh, that's going to be a problem. Now, let's think about this. It says that his bed was of such a size that, yeah, if you subtract about a cubit from it, you'd get 12, 13 feet. And yeah, if you measure my bed and subtract a foot, that's about how tall I am. Although if you measure my bed, you would think I'm 5 times wider than I actually am, by the way.
Yeah.
And also, I'm not an ancient sovereign king. I don't have luxuries, right? I wouldn't have a ridiculously large bed made just because I'm a king, where he might have. Just
Yeah.
like you drive by a mansion, you'd think, oh man, 30 people must live in there. No, it's just 2, right?
Mm.
Or 1.
Yeah.
The issue is that archaeologically, we have found a bed that matched the dimensions of that described of Og, and these are ritual beds. They're not beds that were meant to be slept on. They're ritual objects upon which supposedly the male and female god would come down and do their copulation. So
Yeah.
it's not even that he slept on this thing. It was a ritual object. So, I mean, there you go. I know all this stuff about really tall beings is exciting, but I just do not see it anywhere in scripture, anywhere.
Yeah. And you just brought us back to the point of interpretation method. You just pointed out one of the cultural senses that everybody will totally miss because XYZ person has made up a thing about this and we take it in at face value. It's just like when a word of faith teacher says, look, God's going to bless you. And they take it out of a scripture from the Old Testament when that specific blessing was for an Old Testament prophet or, one of the patriarchs. Then it doesn't necessarily belong to you. And they took it out of context and they added this whole mystical thing to it where you speak something and God's going to give you $1 million, So it's the same way we're taking this where we read a scripture and we don't get the cultural context, and here we go. Another thing is made up.
Now, someone reminded me of something I forgot, which is the issue of 6 fingers and 6 toes.
Okay.
I can't tell you how many times I've been told that's a Nephilim trait. Okay. When the Bible talks about 6 fingers and 6 toes, first, it states it about one single person. One. And he's not a Nephil, he's a Repha. So forget that. Okay. It has nothing to do with Nephilim, and it's not a trait. It's just, we know it's just a genetic mutation whereby your genetics just cause an extra finger to grow. It happens. Yeah. But it has nothing to do with Nephilim or, some kind of demonic genetic manipulation. The other thing that I thought I should know is, incidentally, if there were ever any people anywhere on the planet that were 8 feet tall, 10 feet tall, 12, 15, my opinion is good for them. What do I care? I mean, that's not an issue for me. I don't want to be misunderstood. My point is, in the biblical material, what does it actually tell us? But if there have existed extremely tall people, good for them. That's not an issue for me. I hope they enjoyed themselves. What do you want me to tell you?
And that's the thing here, that we haven't even gone into that aspect. So we're right now, we're just sticking to the Bible and what it actually says versus, the American Indians' tales of giants that would run and pick up buffaloes and eat them and whatnot. That's a whole nother story, So right now we're on Bible. But
I will say this much, though. Why is it that virtually every ancient culture has such similar stories, even though they live far enough apart where it's extremely rare that they would have had communication such that these basic stories would end up at the core of their cultural identity? And it seems to me that this came about because after the Tower of Babel event, when people lived in relatively close proximity, They were then dispersed throughout the earth, right? And they took with them what was then commonly known shared history. But as they moved apart from each other, as time passed, and as the stories were embellished in this or that point, then that's what ended up becoming called myth or legend. So that's just what it seems to me that's how that came about.
Yeah.
Now, I think we could wrap it up by talking about demons.
Okay.
Okay. Now, generally, there's people say demons are either fallen angels or they're not.
Right.
Okay. Fair enough. They are the fallen angels or they're not. Now, why think that they're not fallen angels? Well, because they exhibit different characteristics than angels do. Okay, fair enough. For example, as we said, angels are embodied in their own kind of flesh, but demons are spirit. So that alone is extremely different, right? And then there's people who claim that Nephilim are the spirits of, that demons are the spirits of dead Nephilim. Now, that comes to us from the apocryphal or pseudepigraphical book Jubilees, and also from Ethiopic Enoch. So let's make sure we categorize that as unbiblical folklore, okay? I'm not talking yet about whether I think it's accurate or not. Let's just categorize it properly. It's not biblical. And it came about millennia after Genesis was written, after the whole Torah was written, and centuries after the whole Tanakh was written, the Old Testament, okay? It came to us from the Second Temple period of Judaism, which is notorious for wild speculations. So this, incidentally, is where you get most of the description of Nephilim as being, as the Ethiopic Enoch has them, miles tall, okay? Miles. And like the Talmud says, they're so tall they wear the sun as a necklace. Ouch. Okay, I mean, you get preposterous tales, tall tales. And incidentally, I'm not saying they're preposterous as an argument from incredulity. I'm not saying because I subjectively think it's preposterous, therefore it's preposterous. I'm saying because we know of things such as the inverse square law, whereby, let's say you had a person that's as tall as a telephone pole. They wouldn't be as thin as a telephone pole because the growth is exponential. It would happen, they would also be wider and thicker. So if they were miles and miles tall, they would shatter their own bones just taking a step. That's just how it is. And they would never be able to consume enough food to grow that big anyway. Just the caloric requirements just to stay alive, the basal metabolic rate, the requirements just to lay there and exist would be unsustainable, much less having to move around.
So they're like confusing figurative language rather than literal.
Well, I mean, again, it's fun and exciting to tell stories like that, but we know it just doesn't work. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, demons are either fallen angels or they're not. Now, here's where the Bible really doesn't tell us how demons came about. So this is where I'm going to get quite speculative, but based on the Bible. And because as I was doing my research for my book on demons, having already written my book on angels, and being aware of the claim that demons are spirits of Nephilim, I thought, that theory is pretty good. I'll give them that much. It's pretty good. To me, it didn't quite do the job, but it's a pretty good one, and it'll match up to what I'm about to say. So I came up with my own theory about what demons are. And as I told my pastor at the time, that makes me nervous. I'm not the kind of guy to get online and be like, I have a little niche now. And if you want to learn what demons truly are, I'm the guy because I came up with a special new thing. You know, that's just not me. So it made me nervous that, oh, I think I came up with something new. And that kind of bothers me because that, as it's been said, if it's new, it's not true. If it's true, it's not new.
Yeah. I hear you.
But so, you know, in my book, it took me like 30 pages just to lay this out. So I'm going to have to give you the super succinct version.
Mhm.
And it begins with understanding that, again, angels are physical in their own kind of flesh. That's key.
Yeah.
Okay, now, both Jude and Peter tell us that the angels that sinned, well, what are they talking about? Well, I submit to you, if they're not talking about Genesis 6, I don't know what they're talking about. Because again, there's only one fall of angels in the Bible.
Right. Yeah.
So if it's not Genesis 6, nobody could know what they're talking about. So both of them specify that the angels that sinned were incarcerated. Okay? Now, this made me think that the way it seems like to me is that their bodies were incarcerated, but their spirits were left on earth to roam, and that's what we call demons. And you see how it matches up somewhat to the theory that demons are dead Nephilim. It's the same kind of thing. The Nephilim bodies are dead, but their spirits roam the earth. I'm saying something similar. It's that the angel bodies were incarcerated, but their spirits are left to roam the earth. But I think my theory has a little more going for it biblically, especially because I'm not going to go there yet. I want to back up one step. So both theories explain certain things, like why do demons seek to be worshipped as idols, as images, right?
Right. Right.
Because they once were embodied and they want to see themselves depicted as such. Or why do they seek to possess people? Again, because they were once embodied and they want to be like that again. Okay. But in my theory, the issue is when we get to Revelation chapter 9, right? The abyss, the bottomless pit is opened up, and out come, well, these incredibly symbolically described composite beings. And in my book, I go over what it means. Biblically, I track down what does it mean that they're like locusts, like scorpions, like have hair like women, all that stuff. I track it down. To me, this is just symbolic description of when the angels, the demons rejoin their angelic bodies, and then they come out of the abyss and they wreak havoc on the earth. And then we hear nothing more about them, except that they then would end up fighting the war in heaven against Michael and the loyal angels, and then they lose, and that's when you just never hear anything about them again. They're just condemned. And so this explained to me, why is it that demons are absolutely terrified of being sent into the abyss? That's something they're always telling Jesus.
Yeah.
Are you here to send us there before our time? Don't send us into the abyss. Why not? Well, my theory is it's because then they would re-inhabit their angel bodies, but then they would be stuck down there doing hard time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for however many centuries or millennia. That's why they're terrified.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be stuck. So anyhow, that's my theory about what demons are. So now, to the paranormal theory of everything. Finally, at last. To me, it does seem that demons are the paranormal theory of everything, but not just because I can be like the church lady on Saturday Night Live and just say, oh, what are the demons? Yeah, that's demons. That's demons. And I could just slap the term demon on everything and be done with it.
Right.
That's not why I'm saying that. But when we consider, just like we did with angels, cherubim, and seraphim, when we consider what know about them, it's the same with demons. When we consider what we know about them, then we begin to be able to plug them into various paranormal phenomena and explain it. So, for example, Jesus talks about when a spirit comes out of a man, right? He goes through dry places. And when he comes back and finds the house, meaning the human body, in order, he does what? He goes out and he gets 7 spirits more wicked than itself. Now, that's important because it shows you that demons have different personalities.
I agree.
Straight up. Some are more wicked than others. So, in my mind, that means that there's some demons that are more like secretaries, right? They hang around your home, they hang around your family, maybe for generations, and they're kind of taking notes, okay? Whereas there's other ones that are just so wicked, so enraged that that's what we end up calling poltergeists, right? They're acting out violently. They're doing horrendous things where you see that the personality differences have them doing different things. And so take, for example, necromancers who nowadays prefer the title spirit channelers, right?
Yeah.
People like the psychics, right? The people that you pay a lot of money so they can tell you, oh, you're a 60-ish year old North American. Did your father die of a heart attack? Yeah. The majority of 60-year-old North American men have a dad that died of a heart attack. Yeah. You don't need to. So, yes. Wow. How did you know that? Whatever. They have a shtick. Okay. But how is it that every now and then one of those psychics will seem to actually know something that they really shouldn't know about you? Well, there's been demons hanging around your family for generations, and they communicated to the psychic, right?
Yep.
And I mean, we know they have a shtick. We know about cold reading. We know tons of it is absolutely fake. But I'm saying that's one of the ways that could happen. So there's a part of an explanation there. Now, what about ghosts? Ghosts are said to be the spirits of dead humans, right? Oh, I saw the ghost of a person who was killed here decades ago, or my grandma, or whatever. But we know that absent from the body is present with the Lord.
Right.
So I think that, again, you have these demons that have been hanging around long enough, and they're able to somehow, sometimes, cause a sort of mental illusion whereby you either think you're seeing something, or maybe they're manifesting some kind of light or something, or as we're told, that matter is just compressed energy. Maybe they're able to cause something to be seen, and your dear grandma thus and such, and the lost keys to the cabinet are behind the stove or whatever. So again, you have an explanation for that.
What?
Right?
Yeah. Pause for 1 second. One second.
Yes.
Because I don't want to get too far before I point this out. When you look into the deepest magicians in the world, not the ones that are pulling a quarter from the back of your head, okay? We're talking about the ones that do stuff that defy logic. What do you see? They always depict demons on their flyers. Even Chris Angel, if you find the right flyer, here's an older guy. It's always some red. Well, they're not really red like that, but that's the depiction of the day. And in my eyes, I could be wrong, but I think I'm partially right. At least they manipulate space time as we know it, and they cause these somewhat miracles to happen in these shows. I mean, that's the whole nother show. I'm just pointing this out for those of you who have no clue about this. I'm talking about the most famous magicians, period. Okay, all you'll see is demon work. I mean, some modern day stuff you don't see that much, but it's there when you do the research. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. So besides that, they have a shtick that which is fraudulent. It does seem that every now and then um, some of them get a little spiritual help, as we may say. In fact, um, you can find on YouTube a video of Orson Welles. Okay, Orson Welles is talking about, if you look up Orson Welles psychic or something like that, he talks about how he learned to do cold reading, which let me just quickly say, I have a friend who's a police officer, and I asked him, well, I bet you could tell a lot about a person just by looking at them, right? And he said, oh, yeah. And well, that's about basic cold reading.
Mm.
And also, if you know where a person is from geographically or their last name, or and nowadays, you just get on their Facebook and the most intimate details of their private life,
Yeah.
right? But he's
Yeah.
saying that as he set up himself as a fake psychic, right? He was pretending to be a psychic, but he was just doing it sort of as a sociological experiment. He did say that all of a sudden he started knowing things about people there's no way he could have actually known.
Mm.
And that's when he stepped away from it because, I mean, the way I'm reading it is he realized that something else was going on.
Yeah. Spirit guide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then one thing I heard you rightly point out when you were having your discussion with William Ramsey is another issue, which is that of aliens. Okay, another term that we really shouldn't get, another concept we shouldn't really get into without defining the term, but just roughly speaking, the point was that why is it that quote unquote aliens
Hmm.
travel the vast distances of the entire universe or come over from another universe or whatever on earth they're doing just to tell us that our theology is wrong?
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, generally, they present three main messages to us. And it's a perfect form of misinformation because their statements are accurate, but their solutions are the problem. So they'll say, yeah, you humans are always fighting each other about politics, countries and all that. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you're fighting each other theologically about your religions. Yeah, of course we do. And you're polluting the earth. Yeah, that is definitely a problem. So I agree with those main three claims. But the problem is their solution. Well, then you should form a one world government
Uh-huh.
and a one world religion which worships the earth. Now, how come if you put together Romans chapter 1 and then parts of Revelation, how come those are exactly the sorts of things we're warned against in the Bible?
Right.
That these aliens are coming the vast distances to set us straight about our politics and theology? Really? In
Yeah.
fact, I just wrote a review of both versions of the Day the Earth Stood Still movies, and
Mhm.
wow, are they ever relevant to this issue? But again, so um, the whole alien UFO phenomena is incredibly complicated. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that what I'm going to say now explains it all, but absolutely part of it is that you cannot get into those issues without recognizing that the occult is always attached to them somehow.
Yep.
And so there's another way that demons are a paranormal theory of everything. And so that's about as many examples that I can give. But just to give us an idea, again, as we go from where we started with angels, cherubim, seraphim, Nephilim, giants, and demons, and just take what we're actually told about them, a lot of things start lining up and making a lot more sense. Even things that are really complicated and difficult, it might not answer every question. It's still giving us a really strong and solid foundation to understand these things.
Yeah. Absolutely. Guys, any questions? We had some questions in the beginning. Did it get too deep? You stop asking questions. um, I hope that you guys really got a lot from this. And I see a comment saying, Gary Wayne explains it so much clearer. It doesn't matter who explains it clearer. Make sure you do your own research.
And my reply was, please read Nephilim and Giants as per pop researchers, because I feature Gary Wayne in there, along with a lot of these, what I call pop researchers. And, I basically just lay it out. Here's what they say. Here's what the Bible says. Then you can kind of get to comparing.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I bring some of these guys on my platform, and doesn't mean I agree with everything, but they
Sure.
give interesting breakdowns, and it helps us to understand some of the mythology and whatnot. So that's no respect to Gary or anybody else that comes on here. It's just that I'm always encouraging you to do your own research, to search the Bible, especially when it comes to the stuff that's mixed in from extra biblical sources, like, say, for instance, mythology, and then we start saying, well, this is what it means, and then let's say David's statue of Nebuchadnezzar, the iron mixed with miry clay. There's two theories: it has to be Nephilim or it has to be technology. But it
False
doesn't say
dichotomy.
huh? Say again.
You don't want to get me started, but that's actually a false dichotomy, and I have a whole chapter on that in my "What Does the Bible Say About Giants and Nephilim" book. Yeah, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now, especially because we're about 2 hours in, and I'm just burnt.
Yeah, and I've been out all day as well, so
Yeah.
I don't see any more questions, but I really hope that you guys got a lot from this. Ken, thanks
I think they did. A lot of people are kind of saying they're thanking us, and they chimed in with some interesting information. So it's been some good interaction. The few times I've been able to kind of look over at the comments as we talk, this has been great.
Yes, sir. And thanks for joining me. And I hope to have another discussion soon. Everybody else, man, listen, we have a mandate, and that's to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ above all this information. That's the mandate. And a lot of us, you see what's going on in this world right now. It doesn't look like we are reaching that mandate. Okay, so let's get out there and preach the gospel. Use some of this to spark some interesting conversation, help you. It also helps you to get into deeper research for yourself, and maybe some home groups or whatnot. Let's do it. Let's reach the lost. Ken, any last words? Tell people where to reach you.
Just thank you so much. If you go to truefreethinker.com, all one word, True Free Thinker, I made it user friendly, so everything will be right there that you're looking for. And it's been an honor, a pleasure speaking to you and enjoying the participation of your audience. God bless you all.
Yes, sir. And with that, as we always end the program, don't